Make no mistake about it, friends, it was God's providence that provided our independence, liberty, and freedom. But King Solomon in Ecclesiastes 1:9 said, "There's nothing new under the sun." And true to this statement, we find that dark ages were not the first time that God's people were oppressed and desired freedom. Let's journey back to a well-known Old Testament story of oppression and liberty, a story similar to that of the American Revolution. Grab your Bibles and turn to Exodus chapter 1 and starting at verse 6. We're going to Exodus chapter 1 starting at verse 6. Now Joseph and all of his brothers in that generation died, but the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful, and they multiplied greatly, increased in numbers, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. Then a new king to whom Joseph meant nothing, it came to power in Egypt. Lost place. "Look," he said to his people, "the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies and fight against us and leave the country." We remember the story well. Joseph had just died, as well as everyone in that generation that knew him. When the new king came to the throne, there was a lot of Israelites, a ton of Israelites, like 3 million Israelites. And he didn't understand why they were there because, well, he didn't know Joseph. I can imagine the king and his advisors all sitting around a table. And the king says, "Well, is that the last thing on the agenda?" "Well, king, yeah, there is one more thing we need to discuss. There's this group of people, they're big enough to annihilate us if they decided to, and they're right in our land." "What? Well, why are they here? Who are they?" Yeah, that's a good question, sir. Apparently, after some discussion, the obvious solution was to deal shrewdly with them. So what does deal shrewdly mean? Let's keep reading, verse 11. "Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh supply cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were in dread of the children of Israel. So the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with rigor. They made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and brick and in all manner of service in the field. All the service in which they made them serve was with rigor." According to these verses, life wasn't very good for the Israelites. They were forced to work hard. It says their lives were made bitter with hard bondage in brick and mortar and in all manner of service in the field. It doesn't seem like it could get much worse, but it does. Verse 15, "And the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, whom the name of one was Shipra and the name of the other Puah. And he said, 'When you do the duties of a midwife for the Hebrew woman, and you see them on their birth stools, if it is a son, then you shall kill him, but if it is a daughter, then she shall live.'" Everything seemed to be going downhill at this point. There doesn't seem to be much hope. How would you have felt if you were an Israelite and it was your baby facing the sword? Would you have been pleading to the Lord for mercy and salvation? I can only imagine the dread and horror that they dealt with daily. But God had not abandoned them, nor turned a deaf ear. God always steps in and intervenes when the time is right, and that is exactly what happened here. Let's keep reading, verse 17. "But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the male children alive." In the middle of a country where the king's word is law, these Hebrew midwives knew that it didn't matter what the king said. It didn't matter what the law said if it went against what they felt God would have them do. They knew that eventually what would matter in the end is our faithfulness and obedience to the precepts of God. So I ask you, how is it with us? Are we as resolute to keep God's commandment no matter what the consequences?